Tonight's presentation and the questions and answers will last about an hour. We're going to run a few minutes later because we started a little later. I want to begin the presentation tonight with an introduction, and then you'll hear a presentation from Dr. Hart, and then we'll have questions and answers. So if you have questions tonight as you're listening to our presentation, we want to invite you to enter those into the chat, the dialogue for the chat. And we'll use that then to follow up on questions that you might have. I'm also going to ask Dr. Hart some questions. I'd like to tell you a little bit about how we got here this evening. You know, at Christmas time is a time when people have a lot of trouble anyway, I think, in life. People are struggling. And I was reading that at that time during this pandemic year that suicides were up more than usual. Addiction relapses were up more than usual. The numbers of people struggling with chronic anxiety had increased, and depressive disorders, people were seeking treatment for that more than usual. Domestic violence was up more than usual. And also people seeking treatment for grief is up more than usual because of loss of income, inability to be with loved ones during times of bereavement, and inability to gather socially. And I got a lot of text messages over the Christmas season from people who were struggling and asking about people who were struggling. And I started thinking about my own journey during this pandemic, all of the added things that have come with this season that we're in. Learning the technical assistance manual of the United Methodist Church, trying to keep our church safe, putting health protocols into place as a church, the extra technology that I carry with me everywhere. My little backpack has grown now to 3 bags of technology, including tripods and so forth. And you know, with the goal of trying to protect all of the members of the church, one of the things that's been going through my mind a lot is this nagging feeling that I'm going to forget some protocol or I'm going to miss something. And so we're all struggling in one way or another. So that's how we got into this idea of this series of webinars. So I thought about some experts that I might know that I could bring in to talk to you guys. And Dr. Hart is with us tonight. He is a graduate of the College of William and Mary and the Marshall University School of Medicine. He's a psychiatrist and is going to complete his residency in psychiatry at Albany Medical Center in Albany, New York this June. He performs a lot of different roles within the hospital, but his favorite parts of the job are being a part of the hospital community and student teaching. Though he lives in upstate New York, he considers the state of Virginia his home. Dr. Hart is also my nephew. So it's my pleasure to introduce to you tonight, Dr. Hart. And if he were with us, we'd ask you to greet him warmly at this time, but we know that you're doing that at home. So I'd like to hand this over to Joe at this time, and we're eager to hear what he has to say.
Thank you, Will. I appreciate the warm welcome. It's real good to be here. I very much appreciate the invite. Let me, so you guys, you can just see the picture full screen right now. You can't see anything else, right?
That's correct.
I'm playing around with technology, so I've got it so that I can see my notes, but you guys are just seeing just the blue screen, right? Pandemic fatigue.
Mm-hmm.
All right, great, thank you. So I want to talk a little bit of what we're going on what we have right now. It looks like you guys can just see me and you can see Will. I want to try to open this up, so feel free to chime in anyway. I'm going to try to keep an eye on the chat, but that can also be kind of hard for me when I get into the flow of teaching. So Will, if you happen to see people chiming in, saying things on the chat, if you wouldn't mind speaking up and letting me know in case I've missed it, I would appreciate that.
Okay.
All right. So, to get to this, so we're going to talk again about what's happening lately. We've all been dealing with all all sorts of challenges that we never sort of faced before. But here's the thing is, well, some of these challenges that we have really dealt with before, whether it's like job loss, financial stress, problems with the stock market, activities closing, these annual events you're looking forward to aren't happening, whatever it is. And some of these things are things that happen normally, but the sheer volume that's happening has been, quite unexpected, unprecedented. But like, if there weren't a pandemic going on, losing a job is such a huge risk factor for dealing with depression or substance abuse or other sort of problems with mentalness. So you guys can see the preview. What's happening?
We can see the notes, I think. Yep.
You see it? Okay, that's fine. That's fine. You can. There's nothing private there. Even like Alcoholics Anonymous groups. Sorry, 1 sec is gonna. No, that's not gonna help at all. Okay. So like Alcoholics Anonymous groups, what happened? They stopped. A lot of them stopped meeting or eventually shut online, but that didn't happen immediately. People with mental illness challenges got hit even harder than this going on. People used to seeing their therapist regularly. All of a sudden, that was a big change. But truly, this has just affected it's affected all of us. So I am going to share some stories. Let's switch this to make this full screen. All right. Thank you all for bearing with. Is this all full screen? You can just see this whole thing full screen. Okay. I'm going to share some stories. These are stories inspired by the stories that of people I've met or patients I've worked with. Of course, the names and details have been fictionalized. So Jordan is a father who lost his job during the pandemic. He's dealt with issues of he's had some degree of self-esteem issues that were never really a problem beforehand, but losing his job, being at home, and having this difficulty in the job search has really kind of reinforced this issue and just brought it up over and over again. And he's really been suffering. And he goes through the job hunt and deals with rejection. That's worn hard on him. Amy is a mother homemaker. Her family was largely unaffected, at least as much as anybody's was. The dad is still an essential worker, and he's kept going to work. So some of the kids have been home, and that's the only real change, which is, of course, not a small one. And she's noticed that she's just been feeling tired a lot more lately, and she's been much more irritable, losing her temper much more easily, finding herself yelling at family members when she wouldn't do quite so often. And this is kind of was a sign of some of the more deeper changes that she was feeling, some of the stress and burnout from the pandemic. Meanwhile, Sarah is a 32-year-old who used to going to bars with friends once on the weekend, once on a weeknight, and that of course stopped when the pandemic started. She still keeps going to her job as usual. She would use this app called House Party with friends, and they would sort of drink at home socially. And they continued to have the social interaction, which is good. But she noticed that now that it's a little bit cheaper to drink while at home, she just found herself drinking more. And even during times when she wasn't with friends, she found herself drinking in her free time more, just kind of out of this boredom. So they're all kind of examples of things that have been happening. I want to give you all a chance to sort of think of your own stories. Everyone, either you yourself have dealt with real changes from the pandemic, or you know someone who's dealt with changes, even if it's a small story or a big story, take a bit to think about that. So I have this metaphor of a bucket, of water. And so here we have water pouring from above and water pouring out from below. So water coming from above represents kind of the stress flowing into our life naturally. And this is one of the rare examples where the holes in the bucket are actually good, representing the ways that we're allowing stress to leave our life, the way we manage or deal with it. So you hear people talk about like bottling up versus, or bottling up these issues or the angers versus talking to people about them and letting it out. And of course, that's helpful. But talking to people and sharing things that bother us is not the only way that we kind of release this stress. Just all sorts of small ways here. We have hugs and shakes, or just even being outside the house from work, having this transition between a home time and work time, for some people is a helpful period of time to kind of compartmentalize and to shift modes, and not having that time, that's been for people. So through the pandemic, as a lot of these have been plugged up, a lot of these, we just don't have these things in our life that are naturally giving us energy, giving us rejuvenation, or releasing our stress, whether it's from no longer having the book club or the poker night that you go to, or the one trip that you do every Memorial Day, if that got canceled. You know, you used to go to the gym and your gym membership was canceled. You found other ways to work out, but this part of your routine is kind of been taken out of your life. And of course, if you add in all of the new sources of stress that have all popped over the past year, then you can, of course, it's obvious how this creates a problem together. So all of this can be kind of obvious. I think we all kind of notice, you know, some of these big changes that have happened. But here are the three big questions I really kind of want us to ask. First of all, how has my life changed? Everyone's life has changed. So think about, am I missing something that I used to have? So we pick the example of, I now work from home. I no longer drive to work. Even just like the drive to work, I had this period of solitude. I had this few minutes a day where I would listen to my podcast, my radio show, my music, my audiobook, or just had times with my thoughts and myself. And that's something that you used to have anymore. Some of these things that we lost from the pandemic, we can't easily bring back into our life. It doesn't mean we shouldn't try, but some of them are hard. Some of these things lost are actually replaceable. There are other ways that we can put it back into our life. And looking for those, identifying them can actually really be helpful. You know, what steps can I take to compensate for some of these things? So I want to expand on some of the first question. Is how has my life changed? But also you want to ask, how have I changed? In the example of someone who, throughout the pandemic, you know, many of the different sort of things might have happened. You might be kind of dealing with new things. But some of these changes that happen aren't directly a result of the pandemic. Like you find yourself not wanting to talk to people as often. Maybe you find yourself not wanting to return calls, or maybe you're just slightly more angry person than you used to be, or maybe you're just finding yourself energetic than you used to be. So really paying attention to these changes in your life is something that I kind of want to stress. I hope as I'm talking about this that everyone is sort of reflecting on their own life and asking themselves some of these questions here. As far as specific steps to compensate for this, this bottom one is here. This where it can be hard. It can be very easy to give into despair for things like this. Like, all these changes have happened. There's nothing I can do about it, and kind of just this large feeling of negativity. Here's where attitude can really be helpful. Versus saying this is really hard, I can't change anything, versus asking the question, well, what can I change? What can I do differently? I'm sure you'll be surprised how much of a difference this makes, being able to sort of do this on your own. I'm gonna take just a minute to pull up the chat window. It's not popping up for me. All right. I'm appreciating the comments in the chat. Good to see. I want to kind of give people a chance to kind of maybe think about some changes that have happened. If you feel like sharing this in the chat, that's fine. But also, I understand this is can be a very private thing. Really, I hope one of the takeaways for this is number one, reflecting on your own life, and number two, thinking about what are some positive changes you can sort of bring in your own life. I am going to transition to sort of wondering about when you should seek help, when maybe these are things that you should maybe talk to a professional about. So if you've been having things with, if you've been noticing that you're no longer taking pleasure in the things that you used to take pleasure from, or when you think about doing something fun, you just have the difficulty kind of summoning the energy to actually go and do it or make it happen. That can be something that you should notice and really take note of. Also, if you find that while normally your life would be full of a number of pleasurable, enjoyable, and satisfying activities that take a little bit of energy to do, cooking something a little bit more fancy than strictly necessary to get by with this for dinner, planning events ahead of time, anything that requires a degree of creativity, engaging in some of these hobbies that take some time and effort and maybe doesn't offer immediate gratification. And if you find that you're turning to some of the easier things, reading a book, taking a nap, enjoying Netflix, these are all things that are fine, appropriate, and worthwhile. But if you notice that you've really shifted towards this latter category a lot more than normal, also something worth taking note of. If you find yourself, your anxiety has gotten significantly worse, and when you're worrying about things, that you're having difficulty stop worrying about things, or that this worrying is now starting to keep you up at night, you're finding it's tiring you out through a bunch of different ways. Some people have reported that they've had panic attacks who haven't had those before. A panic attack is like a period of where you have a very severe anxiety where it comes on. It might be triggered by something, or it might come out of the blue with no trigger at all. But a panic attack is categorized by having basically your fight or flight response is kicking into overdrive. Your heart might speed up, your breathing might speed up. You might physically start sweating, maybe not. Generally, it's accompanied with this severe sense of doom, like something bad will happen. You might feel like you're going to have a heart attack. You might feel like something bad going to happen to somebody somehow. I don't know exactly what it is, but it feels very, very real and very scary. If you've experienced one of these and didn't know what it was, that can be a very uncomfortable experience. If you notice that this has started and changed recently, that's also something worth talking to a physician about. There are things that you can do that make these less likely to happen. Of course, if you find that you're having suicidal thoughts, that they've increased, or that you've had them when you haven't had them before, more specifically, if you start thinking about a plan, or start thinking that, this is something that's becoming more and more attractive, or even if the suicidal thoughts have started, you don't want to act on it, but if you're not used to having them at all, it is worth seeing someone about. Doesn't necessarily mean you need to go to a hospital or anything, but it might just be a sign, like your body's telling something. What I have here is a simple self-assessment that you could sort of do right here. You can just read this question. Over the last 2 weeks, how often have you been bothered by these following problems? Finding you have to take little interest or pleasure in doing things. You can say, this happens several days a week. It happens, 50% of the days in the past 2 weeks, and nearly every day. Or how many days in the past 2 weeks have you been feeling down, feeling depressed, or feeling hopeless? So if you answer several days for the first row and more than half days for the second row, for example, that would be a total of 3. So you add up whichever you circled in each of these rows. And if it's 3 or more, then this brief screening says, well, this might be something this might be something that you should talk to someone about. Of course, this is just a very brief screening. This can certainly miss things, and maybe it's not guaranteed if you score a 3 that something's wrong. But it's a good idea to seek a little bit more. Lastly, here some very brief resources. 3 things I want to talk about. You are just wondering that there's just something in general that's sort of feeling wrong. This link up here, bit.ly/mental health screening tool. This will be take 5 or 10 minutes to do. It's actually a Canadian website, but this is the favorite online self-screening that I've found. It's pretty thorough. It's well organized, well written. In the end, because it's Canadian, some of the resources that it offers to you might not be relevant to you, but it does a good job of sort of saying if there's something wrong or not. This phone number is a texting hotline. If you are having any sort of emotional crisis and you just want to text somebody, this can be really helpful. Of course, 911 will work anywhere for any sort of mental health emergency, as well as the medical one can always use. And there's a national suicide hotline. One more thing I want to mention, NAMI, N-A-M-I, the National Alliance for Mental Illness, is another resource that can be very helpful. They are a resource for family members of someone who might be suffering from mental illness. They're an organization full nonprofit made by family members for family members. Whatever that may be. In a handout that I'm going to have Pastor Will send out, I have some phone numbers or ways to get in touch with them. They can be very helpful giving advice, or even if I have no idea what this is, or I don't know what I should do, or I don't know if I'm reacting the proper way to this. I don't know how I should be feeling about this. They can be a really excellent resource. So they've got a phone number you can call from like 9 to 6 p.m. most days. So that brings me to the end of the PowerPoint portion where I talk at you all.
Well, thank you, Joe. And so I want to encourage you guys. We're going to put the resource sheet on the church's website and probably also send it out by email as well. And you can see that what he's mentioning in his talk. I hope if you have questions at this time, you start entering them in the chat, and then I'll ask those questions. I'll try to pass those on to Dr. Joe and ask, but I'm going to ask some other questions of him that maybe will be helpful to all of us. And, you know, again, this is just to prime the pump. And of course, we want you guys to enter your questions that you might have in the chat. You were talking about panic attacks there, Joe. So, you know, you're going off to work one day and you're starting to see certain signs. And you mentioned, I think the heart rate's increasing and the anxiety levels going through the roof. I mean, what is there something you can do simply immediately to help yourself calm in a situation like that?
That's a great thing. Absolutely. The first thing to keep in mind is if you're going through a panic attack, if you're really noticing your heart is speeding up or breathing is speeding up, the first thing that I can strongly keep in mind is that this is safe. This is medically not fatal, and that this is going to pass. And it's amazing. Just keeping that fact in mind is really important. Knowing the
So
difference
just
between a
telling
panic
yourself
attack.
you're safe and that this is going to pass, and yeah. What else would you suggest? That's good. That's good. So
I can give other suggestions. You know, maybe holding your breath will work, or maybe you're not going to find that you're not going to find that helpful. You know, maybe putting your hands above your head like you can if you're having an asthma attack can be helpful. Telling people around you, hey, I just need to sit here for a little bit. I need some space. Don't try to fix me. Don't try to comfort me. And you can even just tell them, I just need 5 minutes.
okay.
Don't expect it to pass in 30 seconds. It might not.
Okay.
But just say, I just can't do anything else right now. I can sort of get through all this.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then, so, you know, you've had the panic attack. You've told yourself you're safe, you know, you're okay. And that this is going to pass, and you've sat and you've put your hands up and you're breathing hard still. When is it time to like go to the emergency room, or what should you do next?
That is a good question. If you've never had a panic attack before, there is absolutely no shame in going straight to the emergency room.
Mhm.
Because it can be very difficult to tell if you've never experienced it before. Is this a heart attack? Is it a panic attack? I've never had either before, so I can't tell which. So if you're really concerned, usually what happens most often is people have a panic attack, they start taking themselves to the emergency room, and by the time you get to the ER, it's already done and they feel fine.
Mhm.
And that's absolutely an option.
Mhm.
If you're truly feeling like there's an elephant sitting on your chest,
Mhm.
you should go to the emergency room even if it turns out it was a panic attack afterwards. It's better to be safe there.
Mhm. So another problem that somebody's mentioning in the someone else is mentioning in the chat, Joe. What about sleeplessness? You know, your people who are having insomnia. What are some things they can do? Oh, by the way, before we finish with, let's go to insomnia next. But I also want to say, um, psychiatrists, of course, can prescribe medicines as well. If you have chronic anxiety, that would be the kind of thing that you would need to seek out. You would go to your primary care physician, or would you call a psychiatrist? How would you do that?
Absolutely. Either is well equipped to deal with this problem. If you already have a relationship with the primary care doctor, you'll probably find that you can get in touch with the primary care doctor much more quickly and get treatment more quickly. Starting with the psychiatrist is fine. Starting with the primary care doctor is fine. Yeah.
Okay. So your primary care doctor, emergency room, if you're feeling like that this is not going away, and that these other things that you've mentioned aren't helping. So what about insomnia? People that just can't sleep, and maybe that's because of worry or other things. What can they do to sort of help themselves before they maybe seek outside treatment.
Right. And so here's a situation where medications can help, but ultimately, if insomnia is a chronic problem for you, then all of the other small changes you can make in your life, changes in strategies, generally are more likely to stick and help in the long term. So you can certainly talk to a doctor about medications. There's nothing wrong with that, but it is worth a shot to try out these other changes. For insomnia, the biggest with the pandemic is I feel like a number of things have been happening. One is sleep hygiene is, I think, a big problem for our modern era in general, even before the pandemic. So keeping your bed is used only for sleep. Being careful about how much light you're exposed to, in particular TV and cell phones and computers. And we have these blue light filters on our cell phones around that definitely does help, but it's still, the cell phone light before bed certainly can be a problem.
So sleep hygiene, that was a term you threw out there. Does that mean like, bathing and changing the bedclothes, or what are we talking about?
Funny you mentioned that, because actually, taking a long hot bath in order to wind down before bed can do wonders for people. But that's not what I'm specifically getting at. What sleep hygiene means is looking at, there's a long list of things that a lot of us do normally, especially nowadays, that tend to interfere with sleep. So looking at all these things, are these small changes I can make in the circumstance surrounding bedtime. Other sleep hygiene involves shutting all the blinds, or even getting blackout curtains. If you have a street lamp outside of your window, then that can be helpful. Not everyone is able to install blackout curtains in their apartment, depending on what you can and can't do.
Control the light, kill the television set. What else?
Spend time in bed before go sleep, reading your cell phone in particular. That violates a couple of sleep hygiene rules. That's cell phones before bed, and it's also being in bed before bedtime can also make it harder to fall asleep.
Mm-hmm. So wait until it's bedtime, only for sleep.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, what about our friends that are having difficulty with isolation, and maybe they're sending us a lot of cranky emails, or maybe they're calling us up tersely, or what some other things that maybe we're seeing some signs. What are some things we might be able to do to help them?
That's a great question. Before we get on to that, I do want to give a shout out to Allison, who's recommending Calm or Headspace. Yeah, there's a number of different tools like meditation apps. If you don't want to download an app, you can even just look at a sleep meditation video on YouTube and just play the audio from that to help you wind down for sleep. There's a number of different like audio guides to help you sleep. Some people even sleep hypnosis, which is kind of designed to have these guided thoughts and meditation to put you in a headspace where you can drift off to sleep easily. All these can also be helpful. So I wanted to acknowledge that good piece of advice.
So where do you get the sleep hypnosis sorts of things? Where do you find that stuff?
That's honestly, these days, like there are new apps out there every moment. If you hop in the App Store and just search like sleep meditation, you'll find a million different results. So Allison mentioned Calm and Headspace. These are two brands, which I've heard good things about. I use Headspace myself. Mm-hmm. So I can certainly say these are helpful. They're not, I don't want to rep any particular brand in particular, but those are perfectly great, as good as any recommendations.
Okay, so one of the things you mentioned in your presentation, Joe, you said, you mentioned taking stock of what you've been through, sort of assessing yourself.
I think that's something we could all benefit from, because I think we've all noticed, we've all went through changes, and if we're not deliberate about, so these things are all happening to us with outside of our decisions, outside of our control. But we will have to take deliberate action to counteract the thing that's kind of passively happening to us, or to restore times of social interaction, restore times of, for some people, if like the kind of chaos and hubbub of daily life is a problem for you, then finding that peace and time for yourself can be important for self-care. If you're single, living alone, then you're probably going to have the opposite problem.
Okay. So we were talking about helping others. We've got that friend that we know is isolated and is having difficulty. What would you recommend about that? Maybe we're seeing signs of, terseness, mean emails, maybe terse telephone calls, maybe increased drinking habits, that kind of thing. What are some things that we can do to help?
That's a really great question. I know that a lot of people, maybe just about everybody, might know somebody who's kind of been taking this really poorly. There's all sorts of advice that one can give, and I can't never say any one thing is right. One thing, though, that I think is probably safe and universal and very important is to maintain contact with this person.
Okay, keep in contact. Don't let them go.
Don't let them go, even if, and this is harder than it sounds. Sometimes, depending on what they're going through, they might not be a pleasant state of mind to converse with. If depending on how feeling, some people can be very aggravating to talk to when they're in this bad mental space. And so if you're feeling real bad and need to protect yourself, then you got to be honest with yourself about that. But for many of us, I think it can be helpful to take some deep breaths, check in with yourself, kind of ground yourself, go in the conversation, not to necessarily to kick their butt and tell them, read them the riot act. Sometimes that's what we have to do in love. But if they're in a bad mental state, not taking the pandemic very well, not taking isolation very well, and not in a place to hear what you think they need to hear, you should still talk to them regardless, even if it's about the weather, even if you're just listening to them. It's maintaining these relationships is so helpful to them. You might be the only person in their life that will listen to them without yelling at them.
Okay. So you take a deep breath and kind of assess yourself, and then, engage in some kind of conversation. Maybe just allow them to get out what's going on with them.
Yeah. And I mean, sometimes, of course, there's a lot of different possible scenarios. I think we all know if someone is like on quarantine specific because they have this like COVID exposure, they're sick with COVID themselves. I think I've noticed that people in these situations tend to have a huge outpouring of interest and care, and everyone wants to make sure that they're okay. So I just keeping in tune to what do they need in their life? What are they not getting from other people in their lives?
What are they not getting from others?
What are they not getting? Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. Let's see. One of the questions that came from some staff members as they were thinking about this, I want to share. What are some things that people can do to substitute for events like graduations, or let's maybe talk about the grief associated with missed graduations, missed funerals during the pandemic. Because of the COVID regulations, obviously, not everybody can show up for graduations, for funerals, things that we commonly do at times when we're grieving. Any thoughts about grief in this pandemic and things to do?
Oh, Will, you love you're pulling out those hard questions.
Okay.
I completely respect that.
Okay.
I'll admit that this is something, an area where I can't claim to have answers really better than anybody else has.
Mm-hmm.
If people have thoughts on this, I would love to see what your thoughts are in the chat. For making substitutions for these events, and of course, that I think find the most creative person you know in whatever community event is happening, and say, put your heads together with them and say, what can we do? How can we get around this and we make this fun despite everything? Dealing with the grief, that can be hard. I mean, talking with people about it certainly can be helpful. And I'm going to come back to this core point of asking yourself, what am I missing? What was the most important part about this? Why am I so sad that I'm losing this? And while I can't make a substitution for graduation, maybe what you're most bummed up is the quality time with your grandparents who are going to show up for it.
Mm-hmm.
Is there some other way you can get that feeling?
Okay.
Or maybe this recognition, some other way you can feel recognized.
Mm-hmm.
It might require you to tell other people, here is what, like, I missed this event. Here's why I'm so upset.
Mm-hmm.
In the case of the teenagers, maybe the parents can come up with some sort of solution.
Very good. Again, if you have questions, please enter them into the comment line, and we'll try to ask Dr. Joe the questions. What about resilience during this time? What can we do to increase our resilience in dealing? Because it seems like one thing after another. Your image of the bucket's great because it's like, wow, there's racial strife. There's a contentious political election, and on top of that, we just happen to be in a pandemic. And then there's the everyday stuff. So what are some things to improve our resilience? Some basic things that we can work on.
Absolutely. Are you seeing the notes right now?
Yes.
Yes, you're seeing the notes. Oh, great. That means I can probably draw on this. Can I draw on this? Mm-hmm. Let me see if I can draw on this. Okay. So first of all, we have this metaphor that we're showing, and any way you can unplug some of these holes, of course, that's going to build your resilience. But what I want to do is I want to think of a meter that we might have. This is meters. Imagine like those boiler pressure meters that you would always see on kind of older shows. So over here you might have the green. Here might be the yellow, and over here might be the danger zone, the red zone. So if your needle is in the green, that's the time. So figure out where your needle is. Is my needle in the green? Is my needle in the yellow? Is my needle in the red? When your needle is in the green, here is the time to do challenging things that's going to build your resilience. Unplugging one of these holes might mean you are the one gathering your social group together to plan an event in the future. This takes a lot of energy. And if you're finding yourself in the yellow or the red, it's completely not going to be an option. So while you're in the green, think of things that will build up some future satisfaction, some future expected joy, even if it takes a little bit of energy right now. Other things do in the green is, or anything that sort of that you feel satisfied doing. For us, for me and my family, it might be organizing a closet, or doing some sort of project that we're going to be able to look back on with satisfaction. For other people, it might be like fixing something that's broken, like handling this one issue that's not really a problem right now, but things like that is going to give you some sense of satisfaction. When you're in the yellow, you've got, you should think about, like, do I, like, maybe, depending on what your yellow is and what kind of yellow we're talking about, do I need to see a doctor about this? Or, like, if it's in the moment you're feeling in the yellow, like, do I need to do some deep breathing exercises? Do I need to reach out and call a friend? Or do I need to maybe just text someone and say, hey, I'm not feeling really good. I don't really have the energy to do more than just reach out that way. But like, I don't have much to talk about. Maybe that's what we do when you're in the yellow. And when you're in the red, all you can do sometimes is just sort of write it out. If you are just feeling completely overwhelmed, this is like you're having a panic attack, or like you are just in a state of in a real emotional bind in the moment. All you can do is keep yourself safe, give yourself time and space to kind of suffer through it until you get down to the yellow and can do something more proactive.
So when it's when you're at the overwhelming point, that's not the time to take some great big, action to try to get out of it.
Right.
It's important to kind of focus on the basic day-to-day routines is kind of what you're suggesting there, and wait to get down in the green zone. Okay. Well, and just focus on the little things every day. One of the people in the chat is saying that he really misses his drive to work, because he's at home all this time. I guess you could take a drive, just go for a drive instead.
It's funny how, like, silly that feels, and how it depends on your situation, but maybe that's what you need.
Okay. Probably that time alone and in the car can be helpful to people sometimes.
Jane saying you fixed your bed frame that's loose, didn't felt much better. That's great to hear. All right, I think we're getting up on 8 o'clock. I am happy to keep this running.
Okay.
I'm in no hurry to bring this to an end.
Okay.
I'll ask some of the other questions then, and we'll see if new questions pop up in the chat. So if someone is struggling with anger, and what are some things that they can do to help curb the anger when they're in the middle of it, or let's say they're in the red zone already? What are some things that they can be? What are some strategies?
So here, this example, if you're dealing with anger and you're in the red zone, then anytime you're in a red zone, I think the questions are like, what are the dangers? How can we maintain safety? So those are the questions to ask. So in the case of anger and you're in the red zone, is there any danger of destroying something, or of hurting yourself, or hurting someone else, or generally doing something you're going to regret? So like, whatever the answer is for like how to maintain safety, that's certainly the priority. Some classic answers are go for a walk, get some distance. I know that saying, counting to 10 is horribly cliche, but we still say it because it still is effective.
Mm-hmm.
What it is like, really want to do this thing right now, and training yourself to say, I'm going to count to 10 first.
Mm-hmm. Just stop and count to
Uh,
10.
it's I feel so cheesy for saying it,
Yeah.
but it can be helpful. Another thing, well, you bring up anger. Problems like anger or alcohol use,
Mm-hmm.
or really any of these problems these are some that might be problems where a family member recognizes the problem before you do.
Mm-hmm.
And times like this, that's having these conversations with a lot that can be absolutely very difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to say if you're having this conversation and you're doing it with your heart in the right place and wanting to help, then you're a hero, because these hard discussions to have.
Mm-hmm.
But it's absolutely worth the time to say, look, this
Mm-hmm.
is something you need to think about, something you need to work on, whatever that looks like for you.
So, all right. Well, that's helpful. You're saying that that safety first, of course, with anger and so forth, but
Mm-hmm.
and then also, taking a deep breath, counting to 10. That's old wisdom, but it's also very helpful. And not being afraid to have that conversation with people, that at some point,
Mm-hmm.
to say, hey, you seem to be having an anger problem. You're bursting out too often. And that's sort of very heroic to do that. So everybody feels the blues over something or other. When do we have to worry about clinical depression? That's coming in from the chat. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So here, this is a great one. So the basic screening I gave, that's a super low level screening. There are other screening tools you can do which they will not self-diagnose depression, but they will certainly show you, kind of take you, multiple steps further. The one link I put at the very end is going to give, went too far.
Mm-hmm.
Come on, why is this doing this? The link I gave at the end of the PowerPoint. Oh, PowerPoint is quite lovely. bit.ly/ mental health screening tool, capitalizing each. In fact, I can probably put that back in the chat right now. That is going to give you kind of a general overall screening for a lot of different issues.
Okay.
Which I think is worthwhile, because sometimes it's usually, clinical depression is a problem, but sometimes it's more than just that as well.
Okay, so there's a screening tool that we're going to put on our website, and we'll send in an email that will help with that and a host of issues. Now, someone's noticing that they're a lot more forgetful during the pandemic. I notice I'm a little more forgetful, honestly. But what's that a sign of? What's going on there?
So
At
a
the bucket
couple of
being
different.
filled? I don't know.
Oh yeah, so that's a couple of different things. A number of different things can cause forgetfulness.
Okay.
And of course, there's it becomes a problem for everyone, and it's not. It starts early, I have to tell you.
Okay.
But more than that, it can be a sign of clinical depression. It can be a sign of worsening anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
It can also be a sign of that you're not getting some forms of care that you need, whether it's sleep or good nutrition. All of these things can kind of put you a little bit off your game, not really feeling. I feel like our memory is kind of one of the more sensitive parts of us, and a lot of different things can make us more forgetful. So
Okay. So that's kind of what you're saying is if you're becoming a little more forgetful, that's kind of a look 360 degrees around. There could be a lot of things going on. But you mentioned nutrition is part of it,
Mhm.
lack of sleep maybe. What else did you mention there, Joe? I'm also
Depression and anxiety will both
depression
can
and
both
anxiety.
really impair your memory. Yeah.
Okay. Depression and anxiety can impair your memory. Yeah.
Depression can certainly impair your memory, partially from not being engaged as much, partially because your brain isn't kicking its energy expenditure up to full steam ahead. So
Hmm.
there's a little, it's, you might not think quite as fast, and the memory might come a little bit more slowly, or a little more with a little more difficulty.
Okay.
Anxiety can cause all that. Plus, you have the extra problem of you're more in tune to normal forgetfulness.
Okay.
Jumps out at you much more clearly.
Okay.
So there's, yeah, I've got that additional layer on top of everything else. But
Okay.
I talk about depression and anxiety like they're two different things, but for many people they're really bundled up, where there's no real telling where one begins and the other one's
Anxiety and depression are tied.
kind of
Okay.
very closely tied sometimes.
Okay. Let's see. There's another. So let's see, Joe. Looking at some of the other questions that came to us before the webinar tonight. Um, what about people who are living at home? How do we strengthen the mental health of the entire family? What are some things that we can do in isolation to look for the whole family, to try to take care of the whole family? Is that a fair question?
That's a great question. It's one where I don't believe my training has uniquely equipped me to answer,
Okay.
uh, but it's a question I love. And heck, even sitting down and having this conversation with the whole family,
Hmm.
going through that creative process as a family, that's art.
So what would that look like? Like coming in and saying, "Hey, we are all in a pandemic, and you know what's going on." What would that be, over dinner, or would that be? I mean, just sometime when everybody's together, I guess, huh?
Hmm.
Just sometime when everybody's
Something,
together.
yeah. Emily gave a great idea. Just have family rituals as well as time alone away from each other.
Uh huh.
Uh, I ask questions like, what do I know that we need that we're missing? That's always a helpful question, as well as like, what do I really want to do that I know maybe I shouldn't? This is just as a more broad question, whether it's for your family or for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, if, for example, it's like, I really don't want to talk to other people right now. Well, maybe you should.
Ah.
Or I really want to just have another nap. Well, maybe, like, do you really need the nap?
Hmm.
I mean, of course, sometimes the answer is absolutely yes. So,
Hmm.
but sometimes if you're feeling this way, you shouldn't, then taking heed.
Okay. I like that. So the same is true of that indicator. If the needle's down in the green, that's when you really want to try the new stuff. But yellow,
Mm.
you kind of maintain. Um, okay. Well, are there any? I'm just looking. I don't see any new questions in the chat. So I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. I want to remind everybody that on February 24th at 7 p.m., we have our next Pender Talk, and that's going to be titled Helping Children Cope During the Pandemic. And our guest speaker will be Dr. Drew Baker, who is a pediatric physician. He also has a master's of divinity, and he's an ordained Episcopalian priest. So again, we hope you join us for that Pender Talk on February the 24th at 7 p.m. And I want to thank Joe for coming out. Everybody, I know we'd be clapping if we were here in the room with us. So you can express your appreciation to him and through the chat or other ways. I want to thank each of you for attending tonight. We did have some sound problems. We're sorry about that. We're working on some things here. I want to thank Mary, who's womaning the webinar also, and is making sure to get information to Pender members and friends that we can about some of the link problems and stuff that were happening. So again, we're glad that all of you guys have come. Thank you, Dr. Hart, for coming tonight. And if it's okay with everybody, I'd like to conclude us with a prayer. Would you please pray with me? God, again, we thank you for those you provide who give us creative responses to the problems that we face, and help all of us, oh God, to find our way during this pandemic. Help us to recognize and get ahead of the mental health problems that we're facing, and to find ways to be compassionate and caring for others who are struggling. We're all struggling in one way or another, oh Lord. So we ask that you continue by your Spirit to strengthen us. We give you thanks for this gathering tonight, and that you've made it possible, and offer these prayers in Christ's name. Amen. We hope we see you guys again on February the 24th for helping children during the pandemic at 7 p.m. Dr. Joe, thank you so much for being with us. And good night, everybody.
Thank you all, everyone. Good night.
Good night.
Well.